Alright, so today I'm going to talk about blueshifting, because this is a topic that I refer to a lot, mainly in my writing, but also when I teach people about research on metaphysics, linguistics, and culture. It started in 2005 with looking up things that appeared in the various Stargate series. So yeah, I'm just going to get started. Alright, so blueshifting is a term that I use that is physics-based. So a lot of New Age language has physics terms like dimensions, which really is actually talking about electron brackets. That's the way I refer to it. So as far as I remember, NASA said that they disproved string theory, I believe, in 2006. Though that's about when I was starting to learn about it. So supposedly there are 11 dimensions that we can know about. In addition, Einstein in the 1930s was talking about, in his theory of relativity, an infinite number of realities. And so my opinions on relativity theory are fairly irrelevant to this video at the moment, though it does come up in some of my work and the way I describe some cultural and spiritual phenomenons, but that's not the plural. Whatever. Anyway, alright, so I'm just making a video on this term for posterity so that when I refer to it, because I teach people about this, and so, well, when I talk about solar religions, and the seemingly unwise, rather unusual practice of looking at the sun during meditation. So, anyway. Alright, so, in physics, a blue shift is an observed change in the quality of light or tone. You will find this most commonly in basic physics referring to the Doppler effect. So this is always relative to the observer's position. So it talks about the color or the tone or the quality of the frequency in relation to the observer's perspective. So another thing that we need to come to a consensus on is that energy is the same on all scales. Any perceived dilation effect is based on our stationary perspective without accounting for a change in the frame of reference or scale. Alright, so blue energy is a higher or faster frequency, and red-shifted tones or colors are a slower frequency. And Alexis Buck, who runs the I'll link it in the comments, in the description. I'm getting it mixed up. I think it's called Ascension Diaries, but I'm getting that confused with the... Yeah, it's Ascension Diaries, not Ascension Glossary. That's something else. But Alexis Buck really explains this very well, about the difference between amplitude and frequency and things like that. So anyway, that's another reason why your grounding chakra is red and your crown chakra is purple. So anything that's blue, indigo, or purple is that blue spectrum frequency. Anything that is a warmer color or a red, and red is generally the standard. Red is red. Blue can be indigo or purple too. That's a lower frequency or a slower or denser frequency. That's another way that New Age people and metaphysicists will talk about that. All right, so another factor here, another factor here is time. And I will address in another video why I believe that this is a very real yet imagined human concept, because it's a measure. That's going to be more relevant to other things. I'm trying to keep this short. So that's a very basic physics background. The physics term blueshifting refers to a faster frequency in relation to your own frequency and position from your observer's perspective. When a car with an alarm passes you, or someone with a loud radio passes you, etc. All right, so with regard to time, Heraclitis said about 2,500 years ago that no man ever steps in the same river twice, because it's not the same river and he's not the same man. So in the same way, we can't really go back in time along one timeline and change past events. Even if we had the technology, you can't. You will have to do so circularly, and you will never arrive back in the same point. So there's that. And Thornton Wilder said something, so I've had this in a journal since 2012. I found this really cool. It was in my anthropology book as a little, it wasn't a figure, but it was like a little side blurb. And I found it really cool. So he says, it is only in appearance that time is a river. It is rather a vast landscape, and it is the eye of the beholder that moves. So I think that's a really cool way to describe perspective and the flow of linear time-space from your linear perspective. All right, so the other thing is time is a grid, and it's a backdrop on which to graph space-time. So you can see events as data points that are kind of sprinkled across it with your, focus. You can also graph lines and say this is a linear, trend or string of events. Yeah. Then another thing. So I guess I'm going to out myself. I trans channel. It's one of the things that I do. I did it a little bit when I was younger, but it's more prominent now that I'm older. Anyone can do that type of work. It's not because I'm so special or wacky. It's because my brain is trained to do it because I do it. The same way that someone who works on their biceps will have, more prominent biceps. It is a neural pathway that I exercise. Anyway, I realized that I used linear, which is an adjective, as a noun, but I pointed out to myself that the idea of linear is an x-axis, and the idea of cultural hierarchy is an x-axis on this grid of time-space. And so I'm reading from my notes on what I said. That linear ideas and hierarchy form the idea form axes, so 4D, or Platonic idea form. Because I work with symbology a lot and subconscious, so my specialty is I work with dreaming a lot. So a lot of those are what New Age people call fourth dimensional or Platonic idea forms, Platonic solids, and the rational relationship of ideas to each other. So yeah, linear ideas and hierarchy form the idea form axes of the grid against which we measure reality in 3 dimensions. So it's essentially an idea that is another measurement. I find it also interesting that linear logic, which is along the same lines as, no pun intended, as the masculine idea of logos. And I'm not saying male equals masculine, but logos is a more masculine idea. That's more masculine. And hierarchy, though in this phase of humanity we are in a more masculine cycle, the idea of hierarchy and cultural training is actually a feminine attribute. So the y-axis is feminine, which is weirdly inverse to the way we represent chromosomes. So that's very interesting. And then the z-axis, which is your third dimensional depth perspective, would then be, so there's a masculine, a feminine, and when you combine those, they create a cosmic sacred child, which is the product or the purpose of the union of opposites. I've recently, in the last 4 months, come across the Kabbalion with the 7 Hermetic basic laws, and that's one of them. Not what I'm saying is my work, it's why this is important to me, it's one of the reasons that's important to me. It's not about Catholicism or, oh, so you're Irish. Yes, but also, so, yeah. All right, so I've covered a little bit about time. I have notes on it, but I didn't intend to go into time for that long, which is a little ironic. All right, and then, yeah, so I'll go into the determinism of free will and archetypes and the idea of the sacred child. Yeah, that'll be in books. So I've got one almost completed that is based on ancient natural law. And then I will have one on solar religions and a god whose name I kind of condense into Luca, which appears across continents, cultures, religions, and through time. I've taught this extensively to one person. I've taught a little bit about it to a few people. So that's going to be the second one. All right, so yeah. I always think I'm very organized. All right, so I'm just going to read from my notes actually here. Blueshifting is an easily identifiable trait of sun worshippers. Some other traits actually are going to be appearance in pairs or twins. Being especially pale, and I'm not talking about, white people or, eugenics or racism, but lack of melanin actually lets in more sunlight. So someone who likes to absorb sunlight will epigenetically prefer skin that allows more absorption of sunlight, generally, from what I've seen. And I will back this up with numerous citable references, because it is hard to hear in our cultural climate and coming from someone with my obvious lack of melanin. Some people may prefer to have more melanin so that they can stay out in the sun longer. But generally you will find people who worship the sun to be pale. Especially when I'm talking about individuals who look at the sun, they are going to be generally paler than the people around them. They may also prefer to grow their hair long. Yeah, twins, long hair, being pale. Yeah, those are some major traits. There's 2 or 3 more that are major ones, but I'll cover all of those in my second book. The second one may actually just be just online. I'll figure that out. Anyway, all right, so blueshifting is a trait of sun worshippers. They blueshift in a way that mirrors the catabasic travel of shamans. So shamans will travel through a tiered reality along a y-axis into an underworld of human consciousness. When someone blueshifts, they're doing the reverse. It's so you're not astral projecting or remote viewing along the same plane. Well, actually, astral projection is kind of up and then over. But it's a directly vertical, excited state that you can reach. You can do it through solar power, basically. You can do it any number of ways, but this is a common thing that I've seen. All right, so many do this by meditating on the sun, sometimes by staring at it. They will often begin to see colors that have no name. In my experience, I've seen a few colors that I don't have names for, specifically one that parallels seafoam green. That's been the one that I see most often. And this is because they're elevating the electrons that compose their body field to a temporary suspended bracket where they begin to see UV light. So matter is just clouds of electrons held together by a unified charge. We are not solid. No electrons ever touch, including the electrons in our body. So what you're doing is you are consciously, as a field of energy, elevating all of those brackets, or all of those electrons to a different bracket, or rather you are suspending your consciousness in a different electron bracket while you hang on to your body, which is more solid. That's perspective. Anyway, all right, so I will address solar people in my second book on the god I call Luca. And so when I write about these gods, I condense their names into one name so that I can know what I'm talking about across cultures, so I will likely write about it the same way. There's one also called Mira, who is generally female and is generally a teacher or a magician, and she tends to have a parallel sister figure who is more into wine and chemistry. They both are to an extent. Excellent chemists, definitely what people call, magi types of things. So anyway, Luca is one of those figures that I've found so many references across cultures that I just kind of condense it into one word for my own sanity. All right, so this is based on 14 years of linguistics. Actually, I think it's 15 now. Let me see, 2005, 14, yeah. Yeah, linguistics, metaphysics research on mass migrations and astronomical scientific religions. Yeah, and I promise to cite many sources once this is put into one file. However, for the time being, I just wanted to record blueshifting. Because we are all made of the same stellar matter, we can connect. Oh, I forget what that's called. It's parallel to phantom limbs, where if you separate a plant, it'll still send electrons along its fake veins that are no longer there if you cut a leaf in half. I can't remember the name of that study. People can still feel phantom limbs. You can connect with, when you share matter with something, you can connect with it. Or rather, matter that has once been unified stays connected. That's getting a little bit too far down the road into metaphysics, but yeah, I just really wanted to get this recorded. I will give more details later. I will definitely cite sources. And a lot of those are going to be artistic. I see representations of sun people in a lot of, there's a video game character whose name I don't know. I'll see if I can find him. A lot of it is art and fiction. Most of the more reliable sources are going to be mythological. But I wanted to get this down. So when I use the term blueshifting, when I speak with people, and in books that I write in the future, currently, in my notes to myself, blueshifting is an excited state of consciousness where the electrons in that suspended state are going into or bordering on the UV spectrum relative to your physical body. Yeah, it doesn't have to be done with the sun. I don't advise staring at the sun, but the fact is people do it. Hi, you're not alone. I am not really, I don't fit the profile. I'm not a sun worshiper. but I research people who are. So, hi. All right.